topic for most of us, although some of us may do it and some of us may not. Okay, I am not ashamed to tell you all that I have an addiction, okay? And I have a very healthy addiction. The addiction is binge watching, okay? How and when did I start binge watching? Technically, I started on Netflix with a show called House of Cards. We'll get to that in a minute. That's 2015, 2016. The way it went was this. My girlfriend at the time got this new audio visual system and she got this new TV, right? So with this new TV, this was the beginning of smart TV technology. So she got all this stuff on her TV and I'm like, this is a waste of money, okay? This is just ridiculous. All these bells and whistles you're never gonna use. So I didn't help her hook it up or anything. So she hooked up Netflix. So then all of a sudden, I look at all of these great TV shows and movies on Netflix that I either didn't get a chance to go to the movies and see, okay, or I had been wanting to see but just didn't have the chance to see. So I'm looking at all this original content. So one of the shows that I looked at was House of Cards. We'll get to that in a minute. So that was the beginning and that was my taste, okay? For lack of better terminology, that was my gateway drug, okay, to the rest of my full-blown addiction to binge watching. So when did binge watching take me over? When did I get addicted? I got addicted in 2020, okay? When the world around us got quiet. Usually we live in a loud world, a busy world, full of bright lights and color, okay? What happened with the pandemic? The world got quiet. We looked outside to empty streets. Restaurants were closed. We had to adjust socially, okay, to what became the new normal. So what did many of us do? What do you do when you got a lot of time at home alone? Well, you find things on TV to watch, or you delve into your social media, or whatever the case may be. With me, I was sitting at home, and everybody was telling me, hey, you know, this is how archaic I was at the time. Everybody was telling me, you don't have to have a TV. You don't have to have a smart TV to have Netflix, okay? So eventually I ended up getting a smart TV, but in 2020 I didn't. It's like, hey, you can get it on your phone, you can stream it on your computer, okay? So I signed up for a membership on Netflix. I got a password, and the rest was history, okay? Now, Sokolovs, here. You guys, Hershey's Kisses, you can take one and one, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Burgess, Hershey's Kiss, you can take one and one. This is my former boss here, so that's why he's acting like that. Okay, so I have equipped you all with a Hershey's Kiss, okay? A great American cultural thing per se, okay? Baseball, apple pie, Hershey's, okay? Beautiful. So this is what we're gonna do, okay? We're going to experience this. Did you already eat yours?
Yes, I
Oh, I'm sorry.
think we weren't supposed to.
I mean, I got another one.
Okay, okay. So this is what we're going to do, okay? Oh, you got one? Okay. All right. This is what we're gonna do. On the count of three, okay, I want us all to open our Hershey's Kisses, okay, and take a bite and consume them. While we consume them, I want us all to close our eyes and enjoy the taste, okay? You can close your eyes for 3 seconds, 5 seconds, however long you want to, okay? But I'm going to ask you a question after we consume the Hershey's Kisses. Okay, on the count of three. Ooh boy. 2, 3. You guys done? Okay. What did you think of? Yes, sir. Huh? Willy Wonka. Okay. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Dr. Burgess, what did you think of?
I didn't think of anything.
Okay. Anybody else? What did you think of?
Those cookies with the Hershey Kiss in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah, love those.
Okay. Scott, Professor Seslar, what did you think of?
Just, you know, the euphoria of having that wonderful chocolate just, melting in your mouth. And
Okay.
it's a great feeling.
Great
I
feeling.
love chocolate.
The euphoria of having the chocolate melt in your mouth. Anybody else? Anybody else? What did you think of?
Just the way it melted in my mouth.
Just the way it melted in your mouth. Okay. Dr. Boston, can you cue that up for me, please? And this one right here. And could you do it full screen if possible for maximum effect? Thank you. Okay, we got sound, right?
I have muted for now.
Oh, cool, thank you.
Every agency you're going to meet with,
Here we go.
provide, advertise, for her. The product itself is one of the most successful billboards of all time. And its relationship with America is so overwhelmingly positive that everyone in this room has their own story to tell. It could be rations in the heat of battle or in the movie theater on a first date. But most of them are from childhood. Mine was my father, taking me to the drugstore after I'd mowed the lawn and telling me I could have anything I wanted, anything at all. And there was a lot. But I picked a Hershey bar. The wrapper looked like what was inside. And as I ripped it open, my father tousled my hair, and forever, his love and the chocolate were tied together. That's the story we're going to tell. Hershey's is the currency of affection. It's the childhood symbol of love.
Well, weren't you a lucky little boy?
Our company excels in television, and we'll tell you exactly when and where to tell those stories.
Sweet tales of childhood. I suppose we'd start with yours.
You can't just have that. You gotta pay us first.
And that's what's so exciting.
I'm sorry. I have to say this. I don't know if I'll ever see you again.
What?
I was an orphan. I grew up in Pennsylvania in a whorehouse. I read about Milton Hershey and his school in Coronet magazine or some other crap the girls left by the toilet. And I read that some orphans had a different life there. I can picture it. I dreamt of it. Being wanted. Because the woman who was forced to raise me would look at me every day like she hoped I would disappear. Closest I got to feeling wanted was from a girl who made me go through her John's pockets while they screwed. If I collected more than $1, she'd buy me a Hershey bar. And I would eat it alone in my room. We had the great ceremony. said sweet on the package. It was the only sweet thing in my life.
Do you want to advertise that?
By the way, you would never advertise. You shouldn't have someone like me telling that boy what a Hershey bar is. He already knows. Don's being modest. But it's just this kind of theater that makes our work so different.
Well, it's quite a story.
It was a pleasure meeting you.
We'd love to have a meal. Stop you from going to some of these other meetings. Ted?
It's a pleasure.
Okay.
Some banks give
Okay. Hit this arrow to go to the first slide. Oops. You said down? Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. So, Mad Men. This is where my addiction started. On for 7 seasons on AMC, won 13 Emmy Awards. Mad Men, the nickname of all of the executives, advertising executives on Madison Avenue during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. The main character, Don Draper, okay? He was supposed to be this advertising genius. He was an executive, yet he was a taskmaster, and he was hard on all those people who worked around him in the name of perfection. The show follows his life for a 14-year period. Now, here's the interesting thing about Don Draper. What did I get from watching Mad Men? Mad Men used to come on Sunday evenings on AMC. I can't stand commercials. They are the bane of my existence. Hence, another reason for my binge watching, okay? Mad Men used to come on Sunday evenings, just like Boardwalk Empire, a show that we'll be talking about in a couple of minutes. But it came on Sunday evenings during the fall, hour-long shows with commercials in between, and it was up against Sunday Night Football, okay? So I said, Sunday Night Football is quicker entertainment. I'm a football nut, so I'll watch Mad Men later. So that is what I ended up doing in 2020. Don Draper made me think about a couple of things. He made me think about every horrible boss that I ever had. Okay, now, Dr. Burgess, he's our immediate former dean of the Lincoln University School of Business. He is not in that category. I didn't want you to feel self-conscious. That's my buddy, okay? But it made me think about every horrible boss I had ever had in my life and what made them seemingly horrible people. I hate to use that term, horrible people, but in working with them, that is the only frame of reference I had towards them. So it made me think, what made them who they are in life? And as you follow the story of Don Draper, you see he is Mr. Madison Avenue. But when you follow his story, you'll see that Don Draper, in the end, had a lot of problems. What were his problems? Number one, we find out that he wasn't who he said he was. His name was not Don Draper. He got that name because he switched the dog tags from his best friend who was killed alongside of him in the Korean War. He did that so he could get a free trip home. Later on in the series, he runs in to his best friend's family. They've been looking for him. We also find out that during the course of the show, you see he goes through 2 marriages. We also find out that under the assumed name, before he was Don Draper, he was married once again, okay? Wow, what a life. So once again, this follows Madison Avenue and the New York City lifestyle from the mid-50s on up and through 1971. The show did a brilliant job of covering all of the different monumental things that happened in American history during that time. The assassinations of the 60s, putting a man on the moon, all the way up to, well, including the Muhammad Ali Sonny Liston fight and what that meant. Now, the funny thing about it was the show didn't do overkill, but it did a great job of filtering these cultural events, okay, through Caucasian Americans on Madison Avenue at that time. Of course, I wasn't old enough, I wasn't alive then, but the other fascinating thing about it is that my parents lived in New York. My family lived in New York during that time. They were professional educators. Our friends were African Americans who worked on Madison Avenue during that time. So during that time, I called my mother up and I asked her all these stories and recollections about New York, and I tell her that I am watching this show. So once again, very, very, very interesting. Now, the show goes from the late 50s to 1971. Here is the thing about Don Draper. Here is how his story ends. He's the central character, okay, to Mad Men. Yet, he goes through his career, he does a lot of good, but he also does a lot of bad by people. So, in the end, what happens? All of the other characters in the show, all of his fellow executives, everybody else who has worked for them, they end up with happy lives, new marriages, new promotions, new jobs, moving to different geographical parts of the country. What happens to Don Draper? He ends up going out to Southern California and connecting with his long-lost niece. She strands him on a hippie commune in Southern California where he proceeds to have a nervous breakdown. The end montage of the series is him meditating on this mountaintop, trying to stave off mental illness, okay, to the scene and the commercial of the 1971 I'd like to buy the world a Coke campaign slogan. Okay? Very, very, very sad, macabre, bittersweet in a poetic way. Okay, so that is what I took from Mad Men. Now, okay, Dr. Boston, what do I hear? Okay, thank you. You're a godsend tonight. So, House of Cards. I told you where this all started. Life imitating art. Okay, a corrupt, manipulative vice president blackmails the boss in resignation and eventually becomes president. This would never, ever happen in real life, right? Okay, now, you're watching this show in 2015 and 2016, okay? The events, the corruption, the greed, the graft, the murder, the philandering, that would never happen in real life. And we're watching it as Americans, and I'm watching it because I am thinking that our democracy is so safe, and our political system is so foolproof, and our society is so collectively together and cohesive that I can allow myself to watch this train wreck on television, okay? Because this stuff would never happen in real life. Okay, I think we call that in the theater a pregnant pause, okay? Where you give the audience the leeway to come to their own conclusions. Okay, now, I'm watching this show. I read an article in the Wall Street Journal, and I think I read another article in USA Today that said around 2016, okay, the ratings for House of Cards began to tank quickly, okay? These articles surmised, and I can say this because I hate to say it, as compelling television as it was, I was one of these individuals, okay? This article surmised that politics in America, the 2016 presidential race, the emergence of Donald Trump and the battle with Hillary Clinton, that real life politics in America became more interesting, more salacious, and more entertaining to watch than TV. And what I can say is, I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of it. After watching the politics every day and night, when it got to what I was going to watch for my nightly television, it was either MSNBC or Fox, Sean Hannity or Rachel Maddow, or is it gonna be House of Cards? Okay, it was real life television, okay? More entertaining by far. Having said that, you have to ask yourself the question when you talk about life, once again, imitating art in real life. The lead actor, Kevin Spacey, a talented thespian, but around this same time, he gets in a world of trouble with allegations of sexual harassment in his personal life. It's like, wow. And I love Kevin Spacey as an actor, and that was just sort of, I don't know, tragedy on top of the whole thing, and added to my guilt for not watching House of Cards anymore because real life politics was more interesting. So then it begs the next question. Were the writers on House of Cards, were they onto something? Did they know something we didn't know? Okay, wow, it was prophetic, prophetic, very interesting. So that's the way I digested House of Cards. Okay, this is another one. Okay, Boardwalk Empire, the dawn of Prohibition, Atlantic City, late 20s, early 30s. Okay, I'm addicted to gangster movies. I just love it, and crime drama. I can't say that I really got anything professional out of this show, but I'm going to share with you what I did get out of this show. Number one, this show was based in reality, okay? Most of all these characters were real. And so, of course, you know, it's Hollywood, but I went and researched all of the real life characters that were a part of this show. Once again, it was on HBO. Sunday nights, an hour long with commercials. Once again, it was up against Monday Night Football. Monday Night Football is gonna win every time. But when I had time to go back and binge watch this, just beautiful corruption in every conceivable way you can think of, okay? And it's interesting to see how Hollywood told the story with fictional characters based on real characters, real names. One thing you learn about this is that with most of these shows, there's no one character that you like 100%. You love and hate most of them at the same time, okay? Just like with Mad Men. Just when you thought Don Draper had a conscience or he was growing a conscience, he would do something evil that would make you hate him all over again. Same thing here with all of these characters, okay? The main character, Nookie Thompson, who was the de facto mayor of Atlantic City at the time, okay? You wanna like the guy, and you can understand through greed and corruption what he's trying to do in terms of growing the industry in Atlantic City during a tough time, which was Prohibition. You get his motive, but then the means by which he went about it, you're like, oh man. So anyway, beautiful, beautiful story of corruption. It's 7 seasons long. Now this is guilty. This is guilty. This is the way my mind works, okay? And this is all just, it's just comical. It's just comical. You ever, and this is the beauty of art, okay, and fiction, so to speak. You ever watch a TV show or a movie where you hate one character so much that you kind of laugh when they get shot or when they get killed, okay? So, the famous actor Jeffrey Wright, for those of you who are James Bond fans, he plays the secret agent Felix in all the James Bond movies. He plays this minister called, his name was Dr. Narcisse, I think, real life character. real life character. So he comes in to he comes into the picture, okay, and he is in New York. He's in Harlem, and he is fashioning himself as a preacher, as a minister, with a flock, okay? And I put that in air quotes, with a flock. But also in real life, and it illustrates this, he was supposed to be one of the first African Americans who ran the numbers game in Harlem. So you see this guy in the series, at one point manipulating people's minds and hearts, talking about God this and God that, but then in the next scene, you see him planning a murder, okay? So the scene where he gets shot, and you guys can kind of Google this, it's called, I think, Dr. Narcisse Gets Whacked, okay? So the scene where he gets shot, he's just come out from delivering a sermon, okay? And so all of these young ladies are around him, and they're like, oh, Dr. Narcisse, that was just a great sermon. That was just a great sermon. So he comes out, and he's talking all of his religious stuff. And he's like, at times like these, the words of Ecclesiastes are forever on my mind. And he puts on this great theatrical show, okay? So as he's putting on this show, and as people are gathered on the front steps of the church, they're listening to him being psychologically manipulated. So then the camera goes from the front to the back, and you see these hands pushing people out of the way, going towards where Dr. Narcisse is standing. So in the middle of him espousing scripture, boom, 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 he gets whacked. And everybody starts screaming and crying and all this other kind of stuff. And then the way he falls over the gate and over the fence while everybody is screaming and crying, and you're looking at this guy and you're like, he got just what he deserves, okay? And then if that's not enough, one of the gunmen comes up, they start to drive off, and it's like, well, wait a minute, we're not finished. We want to make sure this dude is dead. So he comes back and boom, 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 on the ground to finish him off, okay? It's great theater, and if you see it in context, it's really, 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 really funny. Okay, so that's Boardwalk Empire. Okay, next slide, Dr. Boston, please. Luke Cage. All right, for those of you who know me well, you know I am a comic book freak. Okay, we all think of the Black Panther as one of the African-American superheroes in the Marvel Universe. Luke Cage was arguably the first, back in the late 60s and early 70s. Okay, Luke Cage was fashioned along with Daredevil as the first urban superhero, okay? The Luke Cage stories are set in Harlem. So, I'm always wondering, with the rebirth of the Marvel Universe and the DC Universe, I was always wondering, the next reboot that they do, are they going to make a movie about Luke Cage? Okay, you've got the Black Panther, you have the Falcon as a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, who's now taken over the moniker of Captain America. So, people told me, hey, you need to watch Luke Cage on Netflix. And I was like, nothing is going to satisfy me except a Luke Cage movie, okay? Once again, during the week, during the pandemic, I sat in front of my computer and turned Luke Cage on, and I couldn't stop watching it, okay? One of the brilliant things that they did, and I was wondering how they were going to play this in the 2000s, when the character is based in 1960s and 1970s Harlem. Cinematic genius, okay? The way they played the colors, the music, and the whole scheme of the cinematography in terms of how they honored the present day and how the series was really, really, really great for today's generation. But for those of us who remember Luke Cage as a kid, they did his legend justice, okay? So you've got all these biometric supervillains that are popping up out of nowhere that get their powers from various sources, and they come into Harlem with a corrupt mayor, and they all partner one by one with the mayor to try to take over Harlem, okay? Luke Cage, the first street superhero, okay, is the only thing that stands between these supervillains, the corrupt mayors, the only thing that stands between the supervillains and the corrupt mayors from taking over Harlem, okay? Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful show. It uplifted me. It took me back to the positive memories of my childhood. It took me back to my action figures that some of you know I still play with. But anyway, so, all right. Hi. Okay, Dr. Boston, next slide, please. Billions. Okay, this is nice. This is nice. On Showtime. So, you look at this synopsis and you're like, whoa, this is deep stuff. Yes, it is as deep as it looks. Okay, so Axelrod is the billionaire financier. Chuck Rose is the New York State Attorney General. They get involved in a lot of stuff. So I'm watching this, greed, corruption, rich guys playing marbles, all of the conflict, okay, that you can think of that would emanate from a situation like this. So I put my thinking cap on, and I'm looking at all of the ways that Chuck Rose is trying to take Axe down. And I'm like, okay, this is fiction, but it's business. It happens in the real world all the time. How can I bring this to the classroom? So, this is how I did it. I'm looking at it theoretically, and I'm like, how can I take this and make a classroom exercise out of it which simulates the real world? I call it the investigation activity. I use this in my Principles of Management class. This is what I do. I wait till we get to the part in the class when we are talking about human resources and human resource management, okay? I take a $10 bill out, I look at the class, and I place the $10 bill on the front row of the classroom, on the front pew. Then I tell the class, I'm leaving for 10 minutes. Sometimes it's 5, okay? I come back, and the money is always gone. Now, what do? Well, by this time, I've sized up all the different personalities in the classroom. Okay, I know who's going to cooperate, I know who's gonna be kind of off the wall. So I commence to ask all of the students different questions, different lines of questioning. Sometimes, if there is a student, usually it's a straight A student, I take them out in the hallway and bribe them with extra credit, okay? Some of the students who are kind of like not my most favorite, okay, I come at them with a harder line of questioning, okay? So this usually takes the entire class period. And so when this is done, I illustrate to them, this is how an investigation is conducted. I talk about the various ways that different organizations conduct investigations. Some organizations have attorneys on retainer. Some organizations hire ombudsmen, whatever the case may be. So I go through that whole process as I physically illustrated it. So the students have fun with it. So one thing always happens. In the end, nobody rats on anybody, okay? At the end, I always get my $10 back. But the common denominator is nobody rats on anybody. Now, this past semester.
So how do you get the money back, Brian?
Well, they're kind of honest. And they just kind of give it back to me, you know. When class is over, I'm like, hey, I want my money back, okay? So they give it back to me. Now, this semester, this is the first time this has ever happened. In my Principles of Management class this semester, I took the $10 bill out, I looked at everybody in the class, and I said, okay, I'm leaving for 5 minutes, and I will be right back. What do you think happened this time?
Nobody took the money.
Nobody took the money. I came back, and the $10 was still on the front row. Blew my whole exercise. Blew my whole class up. I'm like, I was trying to explain to you guys, and I was trying to illustrate how to conduct an investigation, okay? So I eventually ended up doing it, but I had to chalk and talk instead of using that experience as a simulation. Okay, Succession. Look at this. All right, the favorite and only daughter, the oldest son with the substance abuse problem, yada, 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 yada. Billionaire family, okay? You've got the ex-wife that is still lurking out there, okay? And I didn't mean, when I said the old man, I didn't mean that in a derogatory way, but that's the way in this series his kids view him, okay? When is the old man going to get old? When is he going to give up the reins, okay? And who is going to take over? Now, one of the seminal events that happened in Succession, which I also created a classroom activity out of, was this. They were a smaller company which was afraid of the second company that had the largest market share there in the media business. They wanted to buy the larger company. They were going to have to take out a big, big loan and leverage a lot of the company assets to do that. So this whole thing took place over an entire season, okay? I brought this to the classroom as well. One set of students gets to be the family. The other set of students gets to be the larger company. I give them both fact sheets with facts and figures, and I allow them to negotiate. I play the bank with a whole bunch of fake money that I use for props. They really, really, really get into it. There's always a different result or outcome. So the purpose of this exercise is to illustrate a hostile takeover or a leveraged buyout. Sometimes it ends up where the larger company just wants to sell out, and then sometimes they end up negotiating a 51 to 49% deal. And so at the end of the exercise, they know what it takes and how complicated and how complex these negotiations can be. So this happened in Succession, and I also do this as a part of the exercise. I take one student who is the vice president of the company that's being bought out. So usually when I see this happening, the company that is trying to get bought out is very, 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 well, they're being very stubborn and they're being very difficult in their negotiation. So there's always a number two person that is in charge. There's always a number two person that is in charge in that group. During the middle of the exercise, or when it seems as though the deal is about to get done, I take that student out of the classroom, I take that student in the hallway, and I offer them a brand new job with the Succession family, okay? And I make it a deal that is too sweet to resist. Sometimes the students take the deal, sometimes they don't. And so when it's all over, they ask me, well, does that happen in real life? If, I'm competing against somebody, can they come to me and offer me a deal that's too sweet to resist and then put me in that kind of position and put that kind of temptation in front of me? Oh yes, happens all the time, happens all the time. So they get a lot out of this, all based on Succession. Okay. Startup. Thanks, Dr. Boston, once again. All right, so check this out. What could possibly go wrong with this scenario? Okay? This show ran for 3 seasons on Epics. Okay? Here is the cast of characters here that put this tech platform together. Now, Mr. Dacey, who is the Haitian drug dealer, he provides all the muscle, okay? This person, the prodigal son right here, comes up with all the financing. But he comes up with all the financing from this guy who is his father's former business partner who murdered him, okay? So they go through all this and they create this great tech platform. The only problem is, as you can see here, they get so big that they challenge the number one country, the number one company in the industry that's backed by the Russian mob. Okay? How does that turn out? Well, the rich financier has an island somewhere that nobody knows about. Okay? They set up physical shop, they set up all their equipment and their home base and their offices on this island where they can't be tracked by anybody. So this works for a while, but eventually what ends up happening? The Russians find them, okay? And then it was the end of the series. So I don't know where they ran out of money or whatever the case may be, but it's like, man, so the way they strategized and the strategy that they used and the way this story developed was amazing. Once again, I don't know what the writers were up to or whatever the case may be, but as I looked into this show and as I studied the way the story developed, what this group did mirrored the way Netflix drove Blockbuster out of business, okay? Starting out with a quote unquote inferior product or service, but gaining such a niche that you grow to the point where you become competitive. The big boys, the industry leader, looks at you, doesn't think that much of it until it's too late. So, what they did in this series mirrored that exact same situation, in that when you are competitive in the marketplace, you start out with an inferior technology and you want to be big and competitive enough where you are profitable, but you don't want to become so big that you threaten the main competition or that they notice you until it's too late. Okay, so once again, startup. It starts off kind of slow, but it is an intriguing story that builds and builds and builds and builds, and that was probably like a 3-week addiction for me, okay? Not that bad. Okay. Can you go back, Dr. Boston? Okay. All right. There's a prize here. There's a prize here, okay? How should I pose this question? I'll probably have to come up with a plan B question. Who knows, or does the name Alfred Pennyworth ring a bell?
Any Batman's or Bruce Wayne's butler?
You got it. You got it. For you, Wingsuit Batman. Okay, Dr. Boston, you can go to the next slide. Pennyworth. Okay, entertaining, wildly entertaining. The story of how Batman's parents met Alfred, set in 1950s London, okay? So, usually we have seen throughout the TV show and in most of the movies, we have seen Alfred portrayed as this gangly, genteel, older gentleman, okay? But as of late, with this show, and there was an animated show that came out in the early 2000s that painted Alfred in a different way, okay? In this show, Alfred Pennyworth is no joke, okay? He is a former member of the British Secret Service, okay? He is a former member of the British Special Air Service, the SAS, okay? He runs into Dr. Thomas Wayne in London, okay, who is conducting experimentation on behalf of the US government with, of course, his own money. He's a billionaire. And he runs into Martha Wayne, okay? And Martha Wayne is just a straight up spy. This, as you could imagine, was wildly entertaining and thought-provoking. You would never picture Alfred Pennyworth like this. But the show depicts Alfred Pennyworth as being somewhat of a mercenary and a cold-blooded killer of the bad guys when need be, okay? Now, here's the thing. We're looking at DC, and this is a comic book character. But for those of you who get any ideas, if you ever watch this show, the 4th season now is available, I think, on HBO Max. It moved over from Epix to HBO Max, okay? The show is not for kids, okay? So if you get any idea of watching it with your kids, or some of you have grandkids, or whatever the case may be, okay, this show is not G-rated. It's not a comic book show. It has extreme adult content in it, and once again, is wildly, wildly, wildly entertaining, okay? That addiction was 2 weeks. Okay, Dr. Boston, can we move on to the next slide, please, man? Okay, last but not least, Ozark, okay? Has anybody seen Ozark? Okay, Ozark, wonderful, wonderful. So, you know the premise of Ozark. Jason Bateman and his 2 partners rip off the Mexican drug cartel. The 2 partners do it, and Jason Bateman does not know that they are doing that until they get trapped in the basement and the cartel is about to chop their heads off, okay? Now, his 2 partners get their heads chopped off, but Jason Bateman says, hey, wait a minute. If you kill me, you don't get your money back. So, I found a place, and they originate in Chicago. I found a place in the middle of the United States, which is beautiful, which is scenic, and where we could probably get away with laundering a lot of money, where the feds would not think to look here. It's the perfect place. It's a seasonal place. You've got people who live there year-round, but you've also got seasonal tourists, okay? It's got more square miles of coastline than the state of California. So what do? They end up moving to the Lake of the Ozarks and start their money laundering business. Now, this struck me on a lot of different levels, okay? Now, originally being from New Orleans, okay, there are always, if you're from a city, there are always movies and TV shows that are made about New Orleans, Miami, Chicago, San Francisco, LA, whatever the case may be. But to be a resident of mid-Missouri, okay, and watch Hollywood actually delve into a place like the Lake of the Ozarks, which is near and dear to my heart, have been existing and dwelling there for years and years and years, was extremely, extremely fascinating. The thing that stuck out about this show, and once again, I was late to the party. A friend of mine, one of my college buddies who lives in New York, he said, hey, you need to check out Ozark, okay? And he started asking me questions about it. In 2019, I actually got a chance to take him down there. But he said, you need to check this out. The thing that struck me about the show was, when I looked at it, I said, wow, okay, somebody who is on that show, one of the writers, knows or has lived in mid-Missouri, and they know Missouri, they know the lake, they know Jefferson City, they know St. Louis, they know Kansas City. Very, very, very realistic. So one time I'm down at the lake and I'm talking to one of my barstool buddies, and he says, well, there is a guy who used to work at the Alhana Resort down there in a marina, who worked there for 15 years, 10 or 15 years, and he actually moved out to Hollywood and became a screenwriter, and he is one of the writers on Ozark. I'm like, wow, it makes sense. So, back in 2019, when my buddy is out here from New York, we're driving down the lake. So, him living in New York, he was amazed at all the gun signs and ammunition signs and all that kind of stuff. He's like, what's up with that? I was like, hey, you live in Missouri, is what it is, okay? So, we go down to the lake, and we actually go to the Alhana. So, for those of you who have seen Ozark, and for those of you who will have a chance to see Ozark, the Alhana is the first place that the main character, Marty Bird, sets up shop, okay? So, from what I understand, that was the only footage there that they actually filmed at the lake, okay? They filmed the rest of the show in, I think, Lake Lanier, Georgia, but all of the still photography is at the lake. So you're looking at this place. And so I take him down there, and so he's walking around in awe. He's like, wow, this is the real place. And it's like, yeah, this is the real place. So, once again, very, very, very rewarding in such a way that we don't have to live in New York or LA or Frisco or Miami or New Orleans to have a television show based off of a geographical region, a very, very interesting geographical region that is right down the road. Now, you talk about life being surreal, okay? And I'll be very, very, very careful here because I don't want to mention any names. These parties shall remain nameless. So, you see all that's happening here. So, summer of 2019, I'm hanging out and I'm talking to a local business owner at the lake. This person tells me that they're from Chicago and they have a lot of friends that are moving from Chicago to buy up property and businesses at the lake. So therefore, there are a lot of places at the lake that have been revitalized, if you will, over the past 10 years. So I'm talking to that person in their place of business, like, okay, well, how did you end up moving here? It's like, well, they had been coming here for years and years and years. Then they had a member of the family that they brought down there that fell in love with the place. So they decided to move and buy a business. So the rest of their friends from Chicago decided to move and buy businesses there as well. They had a couple people from Kansas City who they knew that decided to buy businesses at the lake as well. And so I'm talking to this person, and it's just sort of a very, very funny, tongue-in-cheek conversation. This person says, well, hey, you know, we are a very, very, very traditional Italian family. We're Sicilian. Okay. Oh, really? Okay. So then I'm like, oh, well, I asked the question, you guys watch Ozark? Oh, yeah, we love the show. Okay. So then they continue talking. And so just at the end of my meal, again, it was a very, very, very funny conversation. I was like, well, you guys aren't a part of the Sicilian mob, and you're not running from the Mexican drug cartel from Chicago, are you? So they say, oh, maybe not. Who knows? But you should stop by another time and become a part of the family. Like, okay, I might consider that. Okay? So what kind of action does this kind of thing move you to? For the first time in life, in all of the years that I've been going down and residing at the Lake of the Ozarks, this made me get out and explore and go beyond my comfort zone. I just thought that life didn't exist past the 5th or 6th mile marker, although I know it did. So all of my friends are asking me what's real and what's not. I'm like, okay, well, Hollywood gets it right 70, 80% of the time. In this time, they were like in the 80% realm. It's like, okay, there are a couple scenes in a couple of the episodes where they're supposed to be in Jeff City. It's like, okay, there's no place in Jeff City that looks like that, okay? Now, they did get the checkered floors at the Capitol right, okay? There was a scene where they were at, a couple of scenes when they were at the Capitol, and they did get that right, okay? Now, there's other times where Wendy, his wife, she's like, okay, well, I'm leaving and I'm going to Kansas City and I'll be back in 30 minutes, okay? Now, that kind of thing doesn't happen, okay? So, but for the most part, very, very realistic. So people were asking me, do these places kind of exist? Or do you see places like that? And so one summer, this was the summer of 2019, okay, pre-pandemic, I rode around. And I just got in my car for a few days and rode around to all of these places that as an adult, I had just never bothered to venture before. All of these new restaurants, all of these bars, they weren't necessarily new, but they were new to me because they were places that I hadn't been to before. And so I drove out over the bridge. I went to the Shootout. I went to Captain Ron's. Some of you may be familiar with these places. but I went to all these places that I had never experienced before, okay? So, my point is, all of this is a result of binge watching, okay? So, let me end with this story and me and my wonderful mother, my national treasure. And you gotta know my mother. Some of you in the room have met my mother, okay? Very direct, concise, and adorable lady with a deadpan sense of humor. So, this summer, I'm sitting at home with her in Atlanta, and I'm sitting in the sunroom, and I'm watching one of my shows. I think it was Pennyworth, okay? And she comes out, and she sits down, and she gives me the mother look, okay? Does everybody know what the mother look is? Okay, you know what the mother look is. It seems as though the older I get, the mother look becomes more and more frequent. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, here's how my mom gives the mother look. She comes out, she sits down, kitty corner to me, and she starts eyeballing me. Okay, so I'm sitting here, the TV's there. So she's looking at me, and she looks at the TV. She looks back at me. Quizzical look. Then she looks back at the TV and she looks back at me. It's getting to a point where it's uncomfortable. It's like, okay, Mom, say something, okay? And so then she just looks and she's like, the time that you spend on this couch in front of this TV, all of the things that you could be doing, your writing, your poetry, your art, and this is what you do with all your time? And this is when I fell out. She said, this has got to be mentally crippling. So I laughed and I fell out, okay? Hence my idea and the genesis of my idea to encapsulate what I get, the psychological and professional benefits that I've gotten from binge watching since 2020. And I had this conversation with her and I explained it to her in great detail. And I'm like, Mom, I'm going to write all this down. This is going to be a research piece that I am going to expand on, okay? I just haven't been doing this and just mindlessly watching TV and binge watching without getting any benefit out of it, okay? So, in a nutshell, that is my journey, that is my reason, and that is the professional and personal benefit I have gained from my complete and utterly ecstatious and enjoyable addiction to binge watching. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Any questions? Thank you. Got some more Hershey's Kisses if you guys want any. I got a family pack. I can't have any more. Any questions? Okay, well, I'd like to thank everybody. I'd like to thank the library. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Boston, for giving me this opportunity. This is a great program that's going on, and thank you all for coming out tonight amidst weather that is not necessarily what we would define as comfortable, but I appreciate seeing all your faces tonight. I appreciate your presence, as I'm sure the rest of the library staff and Dr. Boston does as well. Thank you all.
Before you guys go, this is part of a lecture series between Lincoln University and Missouri River Regional Library. Our next event is actually not going to be a faculty member. It is actually going to be LU students from the advanced poetry and beginning poetry courses that Mr. Eli Burrell teaches. And it's going to be Lincoln University Poetry Workshop Live Series. The students have been working on poetry all semester, or will have at that point. And they're going to be presenting their poetry. That